Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar. We're announcing the launch of the Enhanced Reporting Europe campaign. Before I hand over to my colleague, I'm just going to give you a bit of background. The goal of this campaign is to support advanced mainstream environmental disclosure practice by EU companies, and it's funded by the EU LIFE campaign. At the moment, companies face a growing demand from investors for reliable and decision-useful climate and environmental financial information, as they seek to effectively price risks and opportunities, while regulators are expected to increasingly introduce more stringent reporting requirements. This means companies, particularly in the EU, where we have observed quite a bit of movement with regards to policy, need to start positioning themselves and assessing the quality of their disclosure ahead of regulation, and in order to meet the rapidly changing investor focus. Speaking to us about the campaign is Nontokozo Khumalo, who is Corporate Engagement Manager at CDSB. Nontokozo spends her time providing support to companies seeking to better report climate and environmental information in mainstream reports. She is currently working with several companies towards improving their climate and environmental disclosures under TCFD and the NFRD. Nontokozo has a strong asset management and banking background within corporate governance and sustainability. Just before I hand over to Nontokozo, I'd like to point out that if you'd like to ask a question, you can email us at info@cdsbglobal.net, or you can send us a direct message on Twitter @CDSBglobal. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Nontokozo.
Thank you, Patrick. Just starting with the next slide, please. So just to make sure that everybody who's joined actually knows who CDSB is, we know that some of you are familiar, but for the benefit of the others in the audience, I'll just give you a bit of background about who CDSB, who we are, and what really is driving our work. So CDSB is a consortium of 9 environmental business and environmental NGOs. We were founded in 2007 at the World Economic Forum in Davos. This was in the absence of globally accepted accounting framework with regards to climate and climate-related financial disclosures. So this group of experts had seen a link between financial aspects and climate issues. And then we're chaired by the World Economic Forum, and the CDP provides the secretariat on behalf of the board. Our mission at CDSB is to create enabling conditions for decision-useful climate and natural capital information to be integrated into mainstream reporting. We achieve this mission at CDSB by offering a framework for reporting climate and environmental information in your mainstream report. CDSB is supported by a group of 40 experts, including accountants, accounting bodies, companies, investors, and academics globally. And then, so in terms of how we actually came to introduce the campaign today that we'll be talking about, the Enhanced Reporting Europe campaign, we actually started CDSB to embark on a 4-year project funded by the EU LIFE program. And this program is really about bringing natural capital information and climate change information into the heart of mainstream reporting and decision making in Europe. A key part of this project is really about answering the question of how do we support companies in meeting the growing investor demand for decision-useful information. When we speak to companies, we find that companies actually tend to cite a lack of clarity with regards to how to structure information within their mainstream report and understanding what does effective disclosure really look like. It's often difficult for companies to also stay up to date with regards to the resources that are available, with regards to good practice, and companies are often surprised by what is available for them and in terms of supporting their reporting. So the Enhanced Reporting Europe campaign really seeks to meet these needs companies are actually expressing by actually providing disclosure feedback and also free access to experts at CDSB. And then we have had great success with regards to the workshops that we have been conducting across the EU. So companies will be able to have easy knowledge with regards to the upcoming workshops that we are hosting, as well as updates on new resources that CDSB is publishing. And then an additional support that we provide under the Enhanced Reporting Europe campaign is to provide companies with internal support, so within the sustainability teams as well as the finance teams. And this is just an overview of some of the offering, and I'll go into detail in the next slide, please. So in terms of access to experts, this is really, like I mentioned, this is at the core of what the Enhanced Europe campaign is really offering. It's an exclusive opportunity to access CDSB's diverse technical team experienced in policy, accounting, and sustainability topics. The team has specialist knowledge in a broad spectrum of sectors, including energy, banking, and asset management. Companies can engage with CDSB team members on TCFD aspects. These TCFD experts have actually been training over 5,000 professionals yearly in person, as well as through our e-learning courses in the TCFD Knowledge Hub that we managed on behalf of TCFD. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the different areas on disclosure feedback that I mentioned that we'd be able to provide to companies, we basically can provide feedback on your EU non-financial reporting directive alignment, focusing specifically on climate and environmental aspects. We also can support companies with aligning with the TCFD recommendations, so helping companies really walk the talk regardless of where they are in their journey towards TCFD alignment. And then another aspect that we look at is effectiveness of disclosure. So we'd support companies who are really seeking to just have more effective disclosure across these areas, both TCFD and the EU non-financial reporting directive. And since the support that we're offering under the Enhanced Reporting Europe campaign is tailored, we can focus on specific topics. So, for example, principal risks under the EU non-financial directive, or the business model, basically where the company has identified an area for development, or where we see that, okay, there is an aspect that can be further articulated. And moving on to the next slide, please. And then going into detail on the disclosure feedback regarding EU non-financial reporting directive alignment, we can basically provide feedback on context-specific elements, so taking into consideration each of the content categories of the EU non-financial reporting directive, and as I mentioned, the effectiveness of disclosure as well. So in assessing for effectiveness of disclosure, we'd look at aspects such as connectivity, relevance, the TCFD principles, and user-friendliness of the reporting. We'd also look at the depth and the quality of disclosure. So whether or not the disclosure is at high level or far too detailed, making perhaps the reporting lengthy. And we'd also provide some form of documentation so that companies can take these reports back and use them internally to engage their colleagues on the topics. And then, as I mentioned, also look at specific areas where we've identified gaps. Then moving on to the next slide. So on TCFD alignment, we know that there are specific issues. So we'll be looking at the 4 elements of TCFD and helping companies basically align along these areas. And we'd report to companies with regards to the quality of these alignments, and then provide recommendations for further alignment. We'd identify specific barriers that the company may be facing internally in trying to align with TCFD, and we provide companies with tips, good practice, examples for effective disclosure, and further tools and resources so that they can keep going in their journey to TCFD alignment. And we'd also, again, identify specific areas if there's a need to do that and focus on those only. Then moving on to the next slide. Just an example of what some of the feedback that we could provide looks like. So we could provide feedback on the strengths and weaknesses of the disclosures, so looking at the specific areas as well as overall strengths and weaknesses. And also a key part of this is good practice examples so that companies can kind of see what this looks like, what the principles look like in action. Then moving on to the next slide. So I did mention policy briefings, but this is just a summary of what you can expect with regards to the policy briefings from our policy team. So companies would receive email updates on policy development, briefing calls, basically where companies can ask specific questions on climate and environmental disclosure policy, and also notifications on some of the working groups that CDSB is involved in, as well as invitations to report briefings. So where we're doing an EU-wide review of disclosure practice, then we'd be able to share some of these findings intimately with you. And then also just a note on the topics, some topics that we cover. These range from the Sustainable Finance Action Plan, taxonomy, and the EU NFRD, as I've mentioned, and any additional guidelines. Moving on to the next slide. And then in terms of internal support, this is really about strengthening the existing knowledge base within sustainability teams, and also driving internal buy-in and topic knowledge within specifically finance teams. We really recognize their importance in driving these kind of issues forward and really driving culture shifts regarding linking climate and financial information within organizations and speaking a common language. Moving on to the next slide. So in terms of workshops, what is very important to note about the workshops that we'll be continuing to host in the EU is that these are region focused. So we try and really tailor the issues that we discuss to the audience based on where they are. And also we cover issues such as really helping companies to improve the quality and the coherence of their reporting, and as well as really providing some tools and good practice examples so that companies can be able to go back and really implement what we're saying in these workshops. And then it is really a good opportunity for companies to be able to engage with peers who are perhaps ahead of them in their journey or basically where they are, and companies can learn together. Moving on to the next slide. And then I mentioned that companies would be updated with regards to upcoming resources. So what I really like companies to note about this is that even if at the bare minimum, you engage us on the resources that you're using and how they're helping you improve your climate and environmental disclosure practice, this is actually useful for us, and we would really appreciate that. So joining the campaign could be really about you simply engaging the resources. And then it's really not, again, something that you'd like to miss out on. There's some courses that companies are often surprised we have. We also have ones targeted for accountants, which are very useful even for the internal engagement that I mentioned earlier. So helping everybody sort of be on board in terms of the language that's spoken with regards to climate and environmental disclosure. Next slide, please. And then key things to note when joining the campaign is that there is no cost to it. It's funded by the EU LIFE program, hence it's free. But what we do ask from companies is for them to renew their membership annually. This is to demonstrate their commitment to the ongoing support that they will be receiving under the Enhanced Reporting Europe campaign. And then companies would actually be able to receive a badge to, again, demonstrate that commitment to enhancing their disclosures. Next slide, please. The sign-on process is really something that we considered in detail to make sure that it's as simple as possible, because we find that sometimes companies really get bogged down with different processes. They have a lot of things to do. So we considered that, and we made it simply about you sending us an email inquiry, and we would either, based on the email, if you intend to join the campaign, you become automatically a member if you are an EU company, or we have an introductory call to discuss where you are and where you'd like to be, and you can commence your membership after the call. So both options are available. And then the third step is really about providing the support service that we have discussed is relevant for your needs and where you are in either TCFD alignment or enhancing your climate and environmental disclosures under the EU Non-Financial Reporting Directive. And then after we've delivered either the disclosure review or whatever service that we've decided would be useful for you, we continue the engagement afterwards, and you are able to basically ask us additional questions and which we can address, and the engagement goes on thereafter. So you're able to access our expert team at CDSB and on an ongoing basis. Moving on to then the next slide as the next steps. So in terms of how you actually join the campaign, I mentioned that you contact us. You're welcome to contact me at this email address, and we are very happy to send the slides to you, and then you can also use that for reference. And I don't know if, Patrick, you've seen any questions that we maybe want to address.
Sure, yeah. So we've just had a couple come in via email. The first one is, does CDSB publicize our involvement in the campaign? Will you be sharing the names of those businesses, I assume, who are involved?
So that's a very good question, because this is something that we would only do later on as the practice evolves, and only with the company's express sort of permission in that regard. So as good practice evolves, we're very happy to share that in order for other companies to learn from that.
Okay, and then another one. Are there any obligations once we become a member?
So the key, the only obligation is that companies actually engage us on the topic. So as I mentioned, for example, for the resources, we would ask that companies just talk to us about whether they're finding it useful. So there are really no obligations where we are checking in on companies to tick some boxes, but it's really about engaging and helping companies evolve their practice over time.
Great. I think that's all the questions that we've had so far. But if anybody has any further questions following this webinar, then please do email Lontecozo or our info at cdsb.net email, or send us a direct message on Twitter, and we'd be happy to engage with you. Personally, I think it's remarkable that it's a free service and it offers such a detailed guidance to companies. So I hope somebody's listening that wants to take advantage of it.
Thank you, Patrick. So I think that if there are no further questions, we will then look forward to any inquiries about this campaign, and anybody who would like to join it, please, you're welcome to contact me, and I really look forward to hearing from you.